Welcome to Perfect Guardian, and I'll tell you about the comparison between Buddhism and Hinduism. Hinduism is about understanding Brahma, existence from within the Atman, which roughly means self or soul, whereas Buddhism is about finding the Anatman, not soul or not self. In Hinduism, attaining the highest life is a process of removing the bodily distractions from life, allowing one to eventually understand the Brahma nature within. In Buddhism, one follows a disciplined life to move through and understand that nothing in oneself is me, such that one dispels the very illusion of existence. In so doing, one realizes nirvana. So I will compare both Hinduism and Buddhism. Now, first I'll talk about practices. In Buddhism, practice of the threefold training: morality, concentration, and wisdom. While in Hinduism, meditation, yoga, contemplation, yajna, that is communal worship, offering in the temple. Now, the place of worship. Buddhism worship in monasteries, nunneries, pagodas, and temples, whereas Hinduism only worship in temple, that is Mandir. Now, the place of origin of Buddhism is Nepal, India. It's mainly, whereas Buddhism is accepted in China, Japan, and Sri Lanka. But the place of origin is Nepal and India, whereas the place of origin of Hinduism is Indian subcontinent. Use of status and pictures, or statues and pictures, both are common. Now, belief of God. In Buddhism does not believe in a creator God, while in Hinduism, many gods, but realize that they all come from Atman. Now, Buddhism is about following the teachings of the Buddha, while in Hinduism, devotion to the various gods and goddess of Hinduism. Whereas the religious law is concerned, in Buddhism, the Buddha's teaching is the Dharma, whereas in Hinduism there is Dharma shastra. Now, the meaning of salvation. In Buddhism has nothing to do with the salvation. The only goal in Buddhism is to attain nirvana. To do this, we should let go of our desires, cravings, and attachments and try to dispel our ignorance. While in Hinduism, reaching enlightenment by the path of knowledge, the path of devotion, or the path of God deeds. Now, whereas life after death is concerned in Buddhism, until one has attained nirvana, he or she will be reborn into any of the 31 planes of existence over and over again due to his or her karma. Whereas in Hinduism, a constant cycle of reincarnation until enlightenment is reached. Now, clergy. In Buddhism, monks and nuns are there who unitedly and exactly follow the teachings of Buddha under the name of Sangha. Whereas in Hinduism, no official clergy is there. Gurus, yogis, rishis, brahmins, pandits, priests, priestesses, monks and nuns are there. Now, the day of worship. In Buddhism, instead of worshipping, Buddhists pay obeisance to Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. Whereas in Hinduism, Orthodox school prescribe 3 prayer times a day, that is at dawn, noon, and the dusk. Now I'll talk about the principle. In Buddhism, this life is suffering, and the only way to escape from this suffering is to dispel one's cravings and ignorance by practicing the Eightfold Path. Whereas in Hinduism, you have to follow Dharma, that is eternal laws. Now I'll talk about definition. In Buddhism, teaching of Buddha is there, while on Hinduism, the word Hindu has geographical significance and was used originally for those people who lived beyond the river of Sindhu or the region watered by the river Indus. Hindus themselves call their religion Sanatan Dharma, meaning eternal law. Now I'll talk about belief. In Buddhism, the Buddha was the teacher to show us the 4 noble truths and the Eightfold Path, the path to nirvana or the way to enlightenment. While in Hinduism, diverse beliefs depending on the sectors. I'll talk about the prophets. In Buddhism, no prophets accepted in Theravada Buddhism, whereas in Hinduism, also no prophets but rishis could be the considered equivalent in Vedic times. Avatars of Vedic gods are different from human reincarnations but could be considered equivalent to Christian idea of God in flesh. Angels. No angels are accepted in Buddhism. But in Hinduism, the concept of angels does not apply. Some mythological stories include rishis who sometimes serve as the messengers of God. Now, whereas the concept of God is concerned, a god or gods have always been rejected wholly by Theravada Buddhists. The only refuges are the three childs, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. While in Hinduism, God is in everything and everything is God. Now, view of Oriental religions. In Buddhism, knows that any other religions cannot lead to the nirvana but never condemns them. But in Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism were considered atheistic religions by traditional Hindu schools. Buddhists do not consider Buddha an avatar of Vishnu and believe that Hindu priests made that claim to esteem the spread of Buddhism, which threatened Hinduism. Now, whereas founder is concerned, Gautama Buddha, born as Prince Siddhartha, was the founder, and in Hinduism, not credit to a particular founder. Now, goal of religion: to attain enlightenment and be released from the cycle of rebirth and death, thus attaining nirvana. While in Hinduism, to break the cycle of birth, death and reincarnation and attain salvation. Now, whereas human nature is concerned, in Buddhism, ordinary human beings possesses greed, anger, delusion, ignorance, cravings, etc. And they were compared by the Buddha as the fools and the blind. Whereas in Hinduism, it all depends on sectors. Now, literal meaning. In Buddhism, Buddhist means those who follow the teachings of Buddha. Whereas in Hinduism, the follower of Vedas are called the Arya, noble person. Arya is not a dynasty, ethnicity or race. Anyone who follows the teachings of Vedas is considered Arya. Now, God's role in salvation. In Buddhism, no God or gods. Salvation is not related to Buddhism at all. The Buddha also told us to depend on our own to attain nirvana. Whereas in Hinduism, beliefs vary by sector. They say God chooses who gets salvation. Salvation is attained via good deeds and righteousness. Now, what were the view of Buddha? Founder of Buddhism or the Four Noble Truths. Whereas in Hinduism, some Hindu sectors claim Buddha was an avatar of Vishnu, others believe he was the only holy man. Now, whereas marriage is concerned, in Buddhism, seen as a social convention and mainly a personal and individual concern, it's not a religious duty. Advice in discourse are on how to maintain a happy and harmonious marriage. Faithfulness and monogamy was encouraged. Whereas in Hinduism, man may marry one woman. However, kinds in mythology often married more than one woman. In Buddhism, confessing sins, not a part of Theravada Buddhism. The Buddha told us that we should strive hard ourselves to dismiss the bad deeds we have already done, and also showed us the way to do so. Whereas in Hinduism, repentance for unintentional sins are prescribed, but intentional sins have to be repaid through karmic consequences. Now, I'll tell you about the view of other Abrahamic religions. What Buddhism believes. Being a dharmic religion, Buddhism has no relative view of Abrahamic religions, whereas in Hinduism is a dharmic religion, not an Abrahamic religion. Nor the status of women in Buddhism. No gender base in Buddhism. In the discourse related to householders named Ten Galavada, certain duties and obligations were mentioned and applied to a specific gender, that is, duties of a husband to a wife and vice versa by the Buddha. Whereas in Hinduism, women can become priestess or nuns. Now, I'll talk about the original language. In Buddhism, original language is Magda, language used during the lifetime of the Buddha, which is the universal language, and in Hinduism it is Sanskrit. Now, rites. In Buddhism it is generally common, while in some Hindus believe in a thread ceremony for men. Followers are Buddhist, and in Hinduism it is Hindus. Now, view of other Dharmic religions. Buddhism believes absolutely that any other idea and concept rather than the Buddha's teaching will never be true or perfect in this world, while in Hinduism they believe that Buddhists, Jains and Sikhs should reunite with Hinduism. When the view of other religion is based, then Buddhism does not condemn any of other religions, while in Hinduism believe all religions have some truth in them. Now, authority of Dalai Lama. In Buddhism, merely belonging to Tibetan Buddhism has no relevance of Theravada Buddhism, whereas in Hindu, it is not applicable. Whereas the statue is concerned, it's often used in Buddhism, and in Hinduism it is allowed. Now, scriptures. In Buddhism, Tipitaka, a last volume of 3 main sections, the discourses, the discipline and the absolute doctrine, which appeared only after the death of Buddha, thanks to the monks who collected all the teachings of Buddha. While in Hinduism, Vedas, Upanishads, Purans, Gita, Smriti and Shruti are oral scriptures. Now, population is 300 to 450 million. But Theravada Buddhists is 100 to 150 million, whereas Hinduism is 1 billion. Now, goal of philosophy. Buddhism is not a philosophy. It is the practical teachings of the Buddha, and its goal is nirvana. Whereas philosophy of Hinduism is salvation, freedom from the cycle of the birth and reincarnation. Now, views on the afterlife. Cycle of rebirth and the death in 31 realms as determined by karma. Good karma can lead one to be reborn into one of the 26 realms of happiness. Evil karma will lead one to the reborn into one of the 4 realms of suffering. Whereas in Hinduism, a constant cycle of reincarnation until enlightenment is reached, after which moksha is attained. Now, time of origin. Buddhism was 250 years ago, Kirika in 563 BCE, before Common Era, whereas Hinduism is Kirika 300 BCE. Now, status of Vedas. Gautam Buddha believed and preached that the Vedas were originally sacred texts that were corrupted by some Brahmins by introducing practices such as animal sacrifice. Whereas in Hinduism, Vedas are generally regarded as sacred in Hinduism. Post-Vedic texts like the Gita are also revered. Now, belief of God. Buddhists do not believe in a creator God, but do have non-creator deities. Whereas in Hinduism, the deity often varies from sector to sector. The Smarta, monists believe everything is God. Now, place and time of origin is like approximately 2500 years ago, but Hinduism, Indian subcontinent, beginning with the Vedic civilization Kirkira in 3000 BC. Thank you. Please subscribe to my channel Perfect Guardian and give your comment.